In March of 2016, one of India's most famous billionaires boarded a flight to London and never came back. He owed 17 banks over $1.5 billion. 9,000 employees had just lost their jobs, but he still had a super yacht, a Formula One racing team, and a very comfortable life in the United Kingdom. This is Vijay Mallya, the king of good times, and one of the most expensive vanity projects in modern business history. To understand how this happened, you have to feel what India was like in 2005. The economy was growing fast. A new middle class was being born. People who had never been on a plane were suddenly buying tickets. And Vijay Mallya, already one of the most celebrated industrialists in the country, looked at all of that and decided he needed an airline. Mallya was not a newcomer to wealth. His father had built United Breweries, the company behind Kingfisher beer, into a national institution. When his father died suddenly in 1983, a 28-year-old Vijay inherited the entire operation. Over the next 2 decades, he turned the Kingfisher name into something much bigger than beer. It was a personality, an attitude, a lifestyle brand that told the world you had made it. So when he launched Kingfisher Airlines in 2005, India did not ask hard questions. It celebrated. The airline debuted on his son's birthday, which already tells you something important about how Mallya saw this business. It was never primarily about logistics. It was about extending an image. Leather seats, champagne at boarding, personal televisions, flight attendants in red uniforms. Flying Kingfisher felt like being invited to one of Mallya's parties, and his parties were legendary. In 2007, he acquired Air Deccan, India's biggest budget carrier, folding millions of passengers into his network overnight. 1 year later, he bought a Formula One team for 88 million euros. Force India, India's first car on Formula One's grid. That same year, he paid roughly $60 million for the Royal Challengers Bangalore cricket franchise. He was a sitting member of parliament. He hosted Bollywood royalty on a 311-foot super yacht docked in Monaco. Indian state banks were lining up to extend him credit. But the empire had a structural problem that nobody wanted to name out loud. If this operation was so successful, why did it require constant new injections of borrowed money? Here is the truth nobody was saying publicly. Kingfisher Airlines never turned a profit. Not in 2005, not in 2008, not in any year of its existence. Every single year the airline operated, it lost money. And every year, rather than fixing the business from within, Mallya borrowed more. The question is, how do you keep persuading banks to fund a company that has never made money? You make the collateral look better than it actually is. When Mallya approached lenders, he offered the Kingfisher brand as loan security, not physical aircraft, not landing routes, not real estate. The brand, a name, a feeling. That brand was valued by hired auditors at 4,100 crore rupees, roughly $500 million. 17 Indian banks, most of them state-owned, accepted this number and extended credit accordingly. The problem? Those same banks' own internal analysts had independently valued the brand at just 160 crore rupees. That is a gap of 25 times over, not 25%. 25 times. Indian investigators would later allege the overvaluation was deliberate, a mechanism designed to extract maximum credit from institutions too dazzled by the Mallya persona to push back seriously. Picture it simply. Someone hands you a painting as collateral, tells you it is worth $500,000, and your own appraiser says $20,000. You lend the money anyway because the borrower is famous, charming, and throws extraordinary parties. That is, essentially, what happened across 17 Indian banking institutions. And while all of this was unfolding behind closed doors, Mallya was drawing a personal salary of 33 crore rupees per year from the airline itself. A company that could not pay its own mechanics was writing its founder a generous annual check. That money was not going back into operations. It funded the image that made further borrowing possible. The yacht validated the brand. The brand unlocked the loans. The loans paid for the yacht. A perfect closed loop, right up until it broke open entirely. The warning signs were never hidden. They just required someone willing to look past the spectacle. By 2011, Kingfisher's own auditors had begun filing what are called going concern warnings. That is the accounting equivalent of a fire alarm inside your own building. Your hired accountants are officially telling investors they cannot confirm the company will survive the next 12 months. Aviation tax authorities were impounding aircraft over unpaid dues. Employees across the operation began reporting missed paychecks. Ground crew, mechanics, pilots, and 372 crore rupees, already deducted from employee salaries as income tax, had never actually been sent to the government. The workers had paid. The company had quietly kept the money. In 2012, the aviation regulator suspended Kingfisher's operating permit. The fleet was grounded. 9,000 people lost their jobs. Restructuring meetings continued. Legal filings multiplied, and Mallya kept appearing at press conferences to talk about recovery strategies. He attended Formula One races. He kept performing for as long as any audience remained, but the creditor banks now held 9,000 crore rupees in bad debt with no realistic path to recovery. Everyone in the room understood the outcome. The only open question was who would move first. In 2016, India's Supreme Court summoned Mallya to answer directly for the unpaid debts. He was still a member of Parliament. His passport had not been flagged for seizure. On the 2nd of March, he boarded a commercial flight to London. Days later, Indian authorities moved to revoke the passport. He was already gone. Extradition proceedings began almost immediately. A British court issued a formal extradition order in 2018. Every legal appeal filed on his behalf was rejected. Then, in 2025, India's Supreme Court convicted him of contempt of court. The specific reason: while under a court-ordered asset freeze, Mallya had transferred $40 million to his children. The man who told 17 banks he had nothing left to repay had found $40 million to move to his family, with judges actively monitoring his finances. As of 2026, Vijay Mallya remains in London, still waiting, the king of good times, living well at someone else's expense. So what does this case actually teach us? First, a brand is not a balance sheet. Mallya borrowed real money against a feeling, a name, an image. The moment the company failed, that brand was worth nothing. Before you invest in any company, ask yourself one question. If the founder disappeared tomorrow, what tangible value remains? If the honest answer is very little, the valuation being presented to you is a story, not a number. Second, cash flow does not lie, but profit figures can be managed. Kingfisher's losses were reported on public filings every year. The auditor warnings were on public record. Nobody wanted to read them because the brand looked too successful. Always find a company's operating cash flow before you trust any other figure. It is the one number that cannot be easily manufactured through accounting choices. Third, when the people at the top enrich themselves while the business deteriorates, that is not coincidence. That is the story. Mallya extracted tens of millions in personal compensation from a company that was simultaneously failing to forward employee tax payments to the government. If leadership is extracting value from a company that is losing money, the company is not their priority. Your capital is. And the final lesson requires no spreadsheet. It requires judgment. Charisma is not evidence of competence. An extraordinary party is not a business model. The most dangerous investments in history have also been the most entertaining to watch, because spectacle is designed to replace the questions you should be asking. 9,000 workers arrived at their jobs one morning in 2012 and found the doors locked. They were not careless. They were betrayed by someone who chose image over reality and found 17 institutions willing to fund the performance. The next king of good times is out there right now, raising a glass and meeting with bankers. Subscribe to Capital Sins so you see the warning signs before the crash lands. And if this story changed the way you think about evaluating a company, click the video on screen, because the pattern never changes. Only the name does.